I wish you were never born, my mother-in-law told my 5-year-old. I could feel the words slam into me like a freight train. My heart stopped. The room fell silent. No one knew what to say. My daughter's wide eyes stared at her grandmother, confused, hurt, but mostly just lost. Everyone else around the table froze. They didn't even take a breath. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I was sitting there in a daze, trying to make sense of what just happened. Could I have heard that wrong? No, I didn't. She said it. She actually said it. To my daughter. The air was thick with discomfort, but it wasn't just awkwardness. It was something deeper, something cruel. What did she mean by that? I could feel my blood boiling, the hurt, the anger, the disbelief. But more than that, I felt a sinking feeling, because I knew something was coming. I could see it in her eyes. I'm Mika, a wife and mother. That's my daughter Mikkel, the little one who doesn't deserve any of this. But here we are at a family dinner, my mother-in-law, Yul Finn, sitting across from me, her piercing gaze never leaving my daughter. For as long as I've been married to Pethagonis, Yul Finn has been cold, distant. She's never liked me, and she's made that clear since day one. But this was a whole new level. Every time I thought things couldn't get worse with her, she found a way to make me feel small, make me feel like I didn't belong. I've never been able to stand up to her, not for myself, and especially not for my daughter. I tried, I really did. But when it came to Yul Finn, my husband, Pethagonis, would always step in. He'd make excuses. He'd play the "she's my mother" card, and I'd fall silent, swallowing my words. But this time, it was different. Mikkel was only 5, and this wasn't just an insult. This was personal. No one had ever said something so cruel, so vicious about her. And yet, there I was, holding my breath, waiting for something, anything to change. I glanced over at Pethagonis. He was sitting there, fork halfway to his mouth, staring at his mother. His face was unreadable, like he was trying to process what had just been said. I couldn't read him. Was he going to say something? Was he going to defend Mikkel? I didn't know. But Yul Finn wasn't done. No, she didn't just leave it at, "I wish you were never born." Oh no, that would have been easy. She wasn't done, not yet. I could feel my blood pressure rising, my heart thumping in my chest. I was holding onto the table, trying to steady myself. I was petrified. Part of me wanted to shout. Part of me wanted to leave, to take Mikkel and walk out. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced for years, told me to hold back, to wait, because this was about to get worse. I locked eyes with Yul Finn. There was no remorse in her gaze. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even sorry. She was just getting started. And I didn't know if I was ready for what she was about to say. I gripped the table harder. I felt my knuckles turn white. I didn't know if it was the tension, the shock, or the anger running through me, but I couldn't stop shaking. She's not done, I thought to myself. I had to prepare for what was coming. But what could be worse than this? And then she added. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. You know when you're just sitting there, trying to convince yourself that maybe things aren't as bad as they seem? That maybe, just maybe, the person you're dealing with has a shred of decency left in them? That's what I tried to do when Yul Finn kept staring at Mikkel. I told myself, she's just upset. She'll calm down. Maybe it was a bad joke. Maybe she didn't mean it like that. But as the seconds ticked by, I knew it wasn't a joke, and she didn't mean it any other way. I said, "I wish you were never born," she repeated, now not even looking at anyone. She was focused on her plate, poking at the food like it was the only thing in the room. But her words, those words, lingered in the air, suffocating everything around us. Finn and I have never gotten along. From day one, it was always the same. I tried. I really did. But there was no winning. She'd say things like, "You're not good enough for my son," or, "You don't know how to raise a family." Small jabs that were always veiled in politeness, but made me feel smaller each time. But this was different. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't even about Pethagonis anymore. It was about my daughter. I looked across the table at Pethagonis, praying he would do something, anything. But he was still sitting there, his face blank, fork still suspended in midair, like he couldn't decide what to do with his hands. My heart dropped. This was the same guy who used to defend her, the same guy who thought his mother was just old-fashioned, someone who couldn't be challenged. But his silence now? That was a choice. It wasn't just passivity, it was complicity. "Why are you letting this happen?" I wanted to scream. But instead, I just gripped the table harder, feeling my pulse in my fingers. I watched Finn's lips curl into a smile, as if she was enjoying the discomfort she was causing. My daughter's small frame was practically vibrating with confusion. She didn't get it. How could she? She was just a child. She had no idea why her grandmother, the woman who was supposed to love her, would say something so cruel. But I knew. I knew exactly why. I've seen this before. Subtle manipulation. This wasn't the first time Finn had tried to pit me against my daughter. It wasn't even the first time she'd made a comment about how much better off Pethagonis would be if things were different. She'd tried to make Mikkel feel small before, but this was crossing a line I couldn't ignore. And Pethagonis? He wasn't just letting this slide. He was standing by, silent, and that hurt more than anything else. I glanced over at Mikkel. She was now staring at her grandmother, wide-eyed, completely lost. I could see the hurt in her face, the confusion, the pain. It broke my heart. Why wasn't anyone saying anything? I couldn't take it anymore. I opened my mouth to say something, but then I heard her voice again, cold and calculated. "You know, maybe you should just go home. Leave. Maybe this wasn't meant to be." I felt my stomach twist. She wasn't done. Not yet. And that's when I knew. This was it. I had to choose. Do I stay silent, or do I finally fight back? And then she added, the silence was deafening. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. The weight of the situation was crushing me. But in that moment, I knew that if I didn't say something, I might never have the courage to do so again. What was I waiting for? Why was I letting her treat my daughter like this? Why had I been so afraid to speak up? My heart pounded in my chest. The tension between us, me, Pethagonis, Finn, and Mikkel, was unbearable. I could feel the anger rising inside me. It wasn't just for Mikkel, although that was the biggest part. No, it was also for me. For years, I had let Finn manipulate me, control the narrative, make me feel small and insignificant. And in the process, she'd gotten to Pethagonis, too. He was always so afraid of upsetting her, of rocking the boat. But it wasn't just the boat anymore. This was my family. This was my child. I was done. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound cut through the silence, causing Pethagonis to glance up at me, startled. For a second, his eyes met mine, and I could see the panic behind them. He didn't know what I was going to do next, but I didn't care. I had to say something. I looked directly at Finn, who was now smirking, as though she knew she had won. "You've gone too far this time," I said, my voice low but steady. The room seemed to shrink around me. Every word I said felt like it was cutting through the thick tension. I could feel Mikkel looking up at me, waiting. I had to be strong for her. She needed me to be strong. I turned to Pathagonis next. "Why aren't you saying anything?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly with frustration. "Why are you just sitting there, letting her say whatever she wants?" Yelfin turned her attention to Pathagonis too, her eyes narrowing. She didn't even flinch. "She's just trying to make things dramatic," she said, as though this was all some game. But it wasn't a game. Not anymore. Pathagonis shifted in his seat. I could see the internal battle playing out on his face. I knew him too well. He didn't want to upset his mother, but at what cost? His silence had been complicit for too long, and today, it was too much. "I can't keep ignoring this," I said, my voice a little stronger now. "I can't just sit here anymore and let you talk to my daughter like that." There it was, the truth, the moment I'd been dreading, but also waiting for. It felt like the room had gotten smaller, as if everyone was holding their breath. Pathagonis finally set his fork down and rubbed his face. He looked conflicted, torn. His silence had been his shield, but now he couldn't hide behind it anymore. He glanced up at Yelfin, then at me, then back down at the table, clearly caught between two worlds. "Mika, He trailed off, looking helpless. I was done waiting. I needed him to choose. But Yelfin wasn't done. "So now you're going to take her side." Her voice was bitter, venomous. "You'll turn on your own mother for her? You'll let her dictate the rules of this family?" The words sliced through me. They were harsh and full of disdain, but I was done being scared. I was done being manipulated. I turned back to Mikkel, who was still sitting there, confused and scared. She was too young to understand everything that was happening, but she didn't need to. She needed to see that I was fighting for her, that I wouldn't let anyone treat her this way. I could feel the fight in my chest. I had to keep going. This wasn't just for me, for my marriage, for Pathagonis. This was for my daughter. As I looked at my mother-in-law, I realized something. She would never change. She would never stop trying to make us feel small. But I couldn't let that control my life anymore. Yelfin stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, her eyes burning with fury. "You'll regret this, Mika. You think you can stand up to me?" Her voice was cold, almost threatening. "You can't win this fight." I stared back at her, heart racing. This was it, the point of no return. And yet, somehow, the fear was gone. I turned to Pathagonis, waiting for his reaction. The question hung in the air. Would he finally defend me? Or would he let this poisonous relationship tear everything apart? And then, just before I could make up my mind about what would happen next, I heard Yelfin's next words. "You think you're the only one who gets to make the rules in this family? You're wrong." I felt the ground shift under my feet. What was she going to do next? "You're wrong, Mika. You're wrong about everything." Her voice hit like a slap across the room, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. I felt my stomach churn as I braced myself for what was coming. Yelfin wasn't backing down. She wasn't just going to accept my challenge. This was personal for her. It always had been. Her eyes locked onto mine, cold and calculating. The tension between us was unbearable, thick as a storm cloud, ready to burst at any moment. What was she going to say next? My heart raced. The fight was happening in real time, and this was the turning point. If I didn't do something now, everything I had fought for would be lost. My daughter's safety, my dignity, my family. It was all on the line. I couldn't take my eyes off of Yul Finn. The power in her gaze was suffocating. She wasn't going to let me off the hook. In that moment, it felt like everything I'd ever held in was rising to the surface, threatening to burst. But I knew that if I didn't hold my ground, I would lose everything I had worked for, the family I was trying to protect. I turned to Pathagonis, my voice shaky but firm. You need to make a choice. Now. You can't keep ignoring this. You can't let her tear us apart anymore. He just stared at me, wide-eyed, like I had slapped him. I could feel his inner conflict, the pressure of being caught between his wife and his mother. But it wasn't just a decision about family loyalty. It was a decision about us, about our family. What are you going to do? I pressed, desperate for him to stand up for us. I could feel the tension bubbling up. Yul Finn was done with pretending. She wasn't going to hide her anger anymore. You don't get to control me, Mika. You don't get to walk all over my family and tell me what's acceptable. Her words were full of venom. I glanced at Mikkel. She was clinging to my side, her tiny hand wrapped around mine, but I could feel her shaking. I had to protect her from this. I couldn't let Yul Finn drag her into this ugly mess. Pathagonis sat there, his face pale, but he said nothing. His silence was becoming unbearable. I couldn't believe this was happening. Was I really alone in this fight? Was my marriage truly this fragile? Yul Finn stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. She was towering over us, every inch of her body radiating anger. You think I'll just sit here and let you disrespect me? No, you'll regret this, Mika. I'll make sure of it. The room was completely still. What would she do next? Then she turned toward Pathagonis. If you side with her, if you choose her over me, then you can forget about this family. You'll lose everything. You'll lose me, and you'll lose your place here. Her words cut through the air, heavy with threat. The room felt even colder, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of it. My heart was racing. I knew this was the moment that would change everything. What was Pathagonis going to do? Would he side with his mother, or stand by me and our daughter? I could feel the question hanging in the air. The world had slowed down, and every second felt like an eternity. Was this the breaking point? Would this destroy everything, or was there still a chance to save it? And just as I was about to say something more, the door slammed open, and we heard a voice we hadn't expected. Enough! The voice that cut through the tension wasn't Yul Finn or Pathagonis. It was Mikkel, my little girl. She had stood up from her chair, her small voice trembling but loud enough to pierce through the chaos. Please stop! I don't want you to fight! Everything froze. I looked down at her, and in that moment, everything I had feared about this family, about the damage being done to her, was made crystal clear. She was my priority. She was the reason I'd been fighting, why I couldn't stand by and let my mother-in-law tear us apart any longer. The room felt like it was holding its breath. No one spoke for a few long moments. Mikkel's innocent plea was a harsh reminder of what was at stake. She didn't deserve this. Pathagonis finally stood, his face pale but determined. It was like a switch had been flipped. He walked over to me, slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Then, without a word, he turned to his mother, who was still standing at the table, furious. Enough, Mother. This is my family, and I'm choosing them. It wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration. His voice was steady, firm, as if the years of indecision had finally ended. I could feel the relief wash over me, but at the same time, a weight lifted from my chest. It was over. I had feared this day would never come, that the battle would be endless, but in that moment, Pethagonis had made a choice. For the first time in years, I felt like Mikkel and I weren't alone. We weren't fighting this battle by ourselves anymore. I reached out, pulling my daughter into my arms. She looked up at me, and I could see the fear start to fade from her eyes. We had won. Finally. I didn't even care that Yolfin was still standing there, her face flushed with anger. She didn't matter anymore. What mattered was us, my family. The consequences, though, weren't going to be immediate. Yolfin stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. We all knew that this wouldn't be the end of her control. She would continue to play her games, find ways to manipulate us, but not in the same way. Not anymore. We had taken the first step toward cutting the toxic ties that had strangled us for so long. Pethagonis looked at me, his expression conflicted but resolute. "I'm sorry it took me so long, Mika," he said softly. "I should have stood up for you sooner. For her." I nodded, the sting of those words still fresh, but knowing they were what we needed. The silence between us didn't feel like a void anymore. It was filled with understanding, the first real step toward healing. As for Yolfin, she would likely never change. But we could move forward. Together. The fight wasn't over, but this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter. The next few weeks weren't easy. Yolfin didn't suddenly disappear from our lives, but she did become more of a shadow. She would try her usual tactics, guilt, manipulation, passive-aggressive comments, but now they didn't have the same impact. Every time she tried, Pethagonis and I stood together, defending our family. I could finally breathe again. The weight of the constant battle had lifted. There was still work to do, rebuilding trust, creating boundaries, but we were moving forward. The love between Pethagonis and me was stronger now. We had fought for what was right, not just for ourselves, but for Mikkel. As I looked over at Mikkel, her face lit up as she played with her toys in the living room. I realized just how much we had fought for. She was worth every fight. And as I held Pethagonis's hand that night, I knew we had finally found our balance, a new beginning for us as a family. Together.